Hi, I'm Steve Robbins, and I am here today with Lorraine K. Lee. So, Lorraine, first of all, is it supposed to be invincible or invisible?
I think we're going from overlooked to unforgettable, invisible to unforgettable, but hey, invincible, influential, all good things.
let's let's end up with invincible,
Yeah,
even if we don't start there. Um,
sure.
People who are watching this obviously know me. My name is Steve Robbins. I used to be the Get It Done guy on iTunes, where I did a lot of personal productivity work. Prior to that, I did a lot of leadership work, and I have a tendency to work with people that want to become central to whatever they're in. So if they're in an organization, they want to become a go-to person, or known if they're a small business person in their community, etc. Who are you? What do you do? And why do you have this incredible, like when I look at you, for some reason, the words unforgettable presence come to mind.
I spent the first decade of my career leading editorial teams at tech companies. So I joined the tech world at a great time. This was 2012. So I was a founding editor at LinkedIn. I was a founding editor at a company called Prezi, which is a presentation platform, and
I know
really got
present.
to use my background in journalism for these really amazing opportunities. And at the end of 2022, I got impacted by the tech layoffs, and so I was really at this crossroads trying to decide, do I want to pursue a path in corporate, or do I want to perhaps try and go off on my own? And so chose the path of solopreneurship, and that's where my book Unforgettable Presence, that's it's a huge part of that, and I'm taking all the lessons and learnings I had in corporate as well as now as a business owner. And yeah, I'm really excited for people to learn how to go from overlooked to unforgettable, really pulling from my own experiences of feeling that way when I was starting off in my career.
So I'll tell you, I mean, one of the things you just mentioned about your career, right? Starting as a founding editor in LinkedIn, you have a perspective on the corporate world because you were number one, you were there, and you were there with a significantly large company that's owned by Microsoft, etc. And unusually, for a lot of people who would have a corporate perspective, your job on a platform that was helping job seekers itself, you were simultaneously on the inside looking at the monolith that you were part of, but you were also, your job was seeing other people who were in that position from the outside and kind of helping them. Um, what did you learn? What did you notice from your time at LinkedIn about just the issues of unforgettable, forgettable, invincible, invisible?
While I was at LinkedIn, I was someone who worked super hard. I worked on some really high visibility projects. So, Steve, you're active on LinkedIn, right? So, in the top right hand corner of your newsfeed, you will see that little module with stories. So, I actually moved to Hong Kong for a year to help launch that. So, I'd be writing
Oh,
news stories during my
wow.
day, and then yeah, and then everyone in the U.S. would wake up to fresh new news, and that was a really amazing opportunity, and my peers liked me and I liked my peers. And so you would think on paper all those things would be the answer to getting promoted, to reaching that next level. But it didn't happen for me. And I was very frustrated because I'm ambitious. I wanted to grow in my career and couldn't really figure out the reason why, what I was doing wrong. And it wasn't until I left LinkedIn where I had the chance to reflect a little bit more, talk to mentors, peers, and I realized that presence was the big missing piece for me. And it became even more, I guess, emphasized, or I realized it was even more critical. A few months later, I'm at Prezi, COVID happens, and then I realized, oh, presence in terms of how you are seen is super important. And then presence in terms of where you are seen is just as important, if not perhaps even more important in this day and age. And so having that experience of mine, and then also seeing, like, working at LinkedIn and Prezi, I was really fortunate that it was a very external facing role. So I got to work with a lot of business leaders, keynote speakers, best-selling authors, and I really got to observe presence in that sense and seeing like how they carried themselves, where they appeared, how they grew their businesses, all these things. And so I feel like it was just this culmination. I'm in the spot where I'm supposed to be right now, but it was like a wonderful learning experience, and also yeah, just taught me a lot in terms of what I need to do to grow my career and to work smarter.
So you just used a phrase there that I thought was really interesting, where you
Uh,
said that wait. what did you say? You said you moved to
Okay.
you moved to Prezi into LinkedIn.
Yes.
Um, oh, you said it's not just how you're seen, but also where you're seen. Tell me
Yes.
some more about that. That's something that I don't often hear people talk about. What do
Mhm.
you even mean by where you're seen?
Yeah.
Given you were talking about COVID and you were probably in your room like I was,
Yeah.
am still.
Yeah.
So talk
Yeah.
about how you're seen and where you're seen.
That's really the premise behind my book is that I thought a lot about, okay, what is the thing, the magic ingredient that gets you from point A to point B in your career? And I realized that presence was, a huge piece of that, and presence more holistically, because I think when we hear the word presence, we often think of, oh, executive presence, I'm of a certain seniority level, it's how I show up in the boardroom, in person, in these really high stakes situations. And I feel like when we think of presence as only executive presence, it can be kind of limiting, kind of intimidating. There's a lot of like coded meaning behind it too. Everyone has their own interpretation of what exactly executive presence is. And so I really wanted to broaden it and say, okay, presence is again how and where you are seen. And so what that means is, yes, you have to do great work, but you also have to advocate for yourself and make sure that your work is being seen by the right people at the right times in the right places, because now, especially with our distributed workforces, you see where you and I might see each other in the office, but perhaps my manager is only virtual. So I need to make sure that I'm showing up in the rooms or chat rooms that my manager is in. We also have LinkedIn presence, right? So we need to show up in the ultimate virtual office, as I like to call it. We have video presence. So we are creating an impression and people are assessing our credibility and professionalism and likability through a video screen. So there's all these, perhaps you can call them smaller moments that happen throughout a day that really add up over time and create your overall presence. So I wanted it to be less of like a one sort of high stakes moment and for us to think about, okay, how are we showing up in meetings? What's our presence there? How are we showing up when we present? How are we showing up our communication like in a Slack channel, in a Teams channel, right? On LinkedIn, etc. So there's so many places now that we can really form that impression, become unforgettable, and yeah, create that overall career brand for ourselves.
So, when you talk about where you're showing up, my no one knows this yet, so this is probably the first time I will ever have mentioned it on something like a live stream. But I have actually written a book on the basics of marketing, where I actually teach
Amazing.
all of the fundamental marketing concepts. And one of the things I talk about is a channel of distribution, which people have you often heard the word, but what that really is, that's how do you reach people? And essentially, that's the question of when you're talking about yourself and developing an unforgettable presence, what are the channels, and you just mentioned the where, what are the channels of distribution for that presence? Because as you just said, there's Zoom, there's LinkedIn, there's face to face. And of course, in today's world, if you're self-employed, as I'm sure you have heard, oh, you have to be on TikTok, oh, you have to be on Twitter, on X, on this,
Yeah.
on this. You could spend 99 hours a week doing nothing
Yep.
but being in all the places. How do I choose? Like, let's answer that question for self-employed people, but also for employees, because we all have to grapple with this. Is that where do I want to be? Because even my absence from a critical channel could be part of could be part of my presence in some
Sure.
sense. Like people
Sure.
when people see my YouTube channel, they're like, wait, you don't have 500 YouTube videos? It's like, no, that's not the channel that I have chosen. I may someday, but it makes an impression, and now I'm kind of like, maybe I should choose that one. So how do I choose? How do you choose? How does everyone choose?
When you are a solopreneur, to your point, like there's so many places you can show up. So I think it's really important to understand where is your ideal audience. So for me, that's going to be LinkedIn. I'm a speaker, I teach, I go into companies. And so that's going to be my ideal client profile. They're going to be on LinkedIn. Um, you might be a more creative, I don't know, like a Gen Z creator doing a lot of brand deals, in which case, yeah, you probably want to be on TikTok, probably want to be on Instagram, right? So I think it really is audience first and then figuring out what are your goals, work backwards from there. To your point, Steve, are like there are so many places you can be and there's only so much time in a day. So I think especially as a solopreneur, you really have to pick and choose and prioritize because it is a full-time job. I think being on social media, I'm kind of on Instagram, but it's like it's just so much work, right? So I can't even put like my full energy behind it. So I think starting off with one platform is a good idea, really, nailing that and then expand as it makes sense.
Which would you start with, or does it depend?
I think it depends, but I would say LinkedIn is always a great place to start because LinkedIn, whether that you're trying to get new clients from there or not, like let's say you go to a networking event, most people will go to your LinkedIn first to understand more about you before a personal website, for example. So I think having that filled out, making sure that represents your brand correctly. I heard the story of someone meeting a CEO at a networking event, and the CEO was super impressive in person, and then they go to the CEO's profile to add them, and there's no profile picture. It's like very very sparse on there, and they're like, oh, these two things don't quite match up. So I think LinkedIn is, again, like generalizing, but LinkedIn will be one of the more powerful ways to create that really strong first impression, and people will go there first if they're trying to learn from you and learn about you from a business perspective.
That tracks for me both as a consultant and also even as an employee. It's like LinkedIn has
Mm.
become the de facto, oh, we're talking to this person either to give them a job or to do business with them. Let me just check out, who are they? What have they done? And I found
Exactly.
myself, I've done that on occasion. Somebody has approached me, or we've met at a networking event. I'm just like, I'm just going to go take a look at their profile and see what they've done, and you know,
Mhm.
which which has its own problems, of course, because people don't necessarily know what they should put on their profile. Some people just, make it anyway. That's a whole nother conversation. Um, Now, what about employees? Because clearly, if you're trying to become an employee, LinkedIn is going to be critically important because HR companies, first thing they're going to do is go to your profile, but or LinkedIn departments. But do I need one as an employee? What? How do I think about becoming? How do I think about becoming unforgettable and developing a presence within a company?
I love this question because I think a lot of people, when they think of LinkedIn, they think, oh, I'm only going to be on that platform if I'm looking for a job. But to your point, Steve, like employees should have a LinkedIn presence, and a LinkedIn presence can really positively impact how you are perceived internally, which I think is a little bit counterintuitive to what a lot of people think. So I'll give you an example. So I started posting more on LinkedIn as I started doing more public speaking. And because posting on LinkedIn can be kind of a scary thing at first, people internally, I think they saw me as more of a leader. I was sort of elevated in their eyes because I'm willing to kind of be out there. I'm sort of a face of the company. And as a result, you get asked to perhaps be on panels, speak on podcasts, be interviewed in articles. And so all of that is building up your brand, building up your thought leadership so that you are seen as more of a senior person. And that really translates into a company as well. Also, the more you post on LinkedIn, this is something that I didn't realize was going to happen, but I really found my voice and got more confident. And I think that was a really cool, unexpected outcome. And that also translates to inside the office, right? Like how you show up at work is going to be impacted by that the connections you make, the things you learn. So I think 100% employees should be on LinkedIn building their thought leadership, building their brand. And it's not just for looking for a new job.
I want to actually go right there to you just said something that I think is getting increasingly lost in this wonderful world of AI that we're entering, which is that writing and creating content isn't just about, oh, I have to generate a bunch of stuff to put out there. The very process of doing that teaches you to organize your thought, your presence, your communication around the way that the impression you want to make. And if you tell an
Mhm.
AI to do it, it's not going to do it the way that you would do it. And then if you show up and there's this big mismatch, people are going to be like, wait, what? um, uh, so I recommend to people, I say, look, do not use a chatbot for the kinds of outward. I mean, use one maybe to check for grammar mistakes, but you want to develop a
Or
distinctive voice because it's the distinctive voices people are going to want to hear. The AI voices people are going to be able to hear in the comfort of their own home on their own chatbot when they want to. That's not going to make people stand out.
yeah, a lot of people they're worried, okay, now with AI, like so many people can post now, it's going to be really crowded, it's going to be hard to stand out. And yes, there's going to be more of an influx of AI generated content, but to your point, you looking over that, if they, let's say AI drafts something for you, like you have your own stories, you have your own human taste, human touch, and so you want to make sure that you're, going over any posts that get created with a fine-tooth comb, but also adding in your own stories and experiences. And AI, that's just not going to be able to capture that. And so what I've been seeing on LinkedIn is the posts that, I talk about three post types: personal, educational, professional. All of these are great, but the ones that are able to incorporate a little bit more of that personal, share more of their stories, those are the posts that really take off, that allow you to build that network, connect with each other. Because I think at the end of the day, LinkedIn is really about community, about relationship building. So anytime you can add something personal that, of course, AI won't know about you and won't be able to replicate, that's where the power of LinkedIn really shines.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So I have this little tagline, which is true. I was raised in a traveling New Age polyamorous hippie commune, um,
Okay.
which I actually was, and AI just can't generate that. You type that into AI and say, "Tell me, pretend that you're someone who was raised in this background, generate a story," and it's like, yeah, no. So,
Yeah.
what is
Very
the unique
specific.
thing? Right. What's
Yeah.
what's the unique or specific thing? I just found out recently that a friend of mine's mother was one of the last people to come through Ellis Island in the
Wow.
1950s. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a heck of a story, and that's something that he could build around.
Yeah.
There's a lot of themes there. So, so let's get concrete about this.
Mhm.
I am getting a new job. Where do I begin? I'm going to walk in. It's going to be my first day this coming Monday. What am I thinking about? How am I going to plot out the first 3 months of my job? Where am I going to go with this?
Well, first 3 months, as you said, 30, 60, 90-day plan, I think is essential. This is something I did in my last role at Prezi. It helped me a lot because you basically break down, okay, exactly what are my responsibilities, what am I going to achieve within the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Now, what you want to do with this is not just write it down and keep it for yourself, but show your manager, right? You're showing that you're proactive, and then also get your manager's buy-in. So when I did this, my manager actually said, oh, I would take this out, I would add this in. I want to make sure you're set up for success and this is, realistic for you to achieve. So I think getting that buy-in is important. And then, we've heard this advice, but it's worth repeating. Talk to as many people as you can. Use that newness as a way to get meetings with anyone you want in the company. It's going to be really helpful in the long term for you to be able to connect the dots and understand not just what you yourself or your immediate team is doing, but how everything connects together. So those would be my main pieces of advice. And then one other thing that I would add is, Steve, I'm curious if you've heard of this concept of a README or a personal operating manual.
No.
Okay, so, this is basically a guide that you create for people who haven't worked with you before to accelerate them, like, understanding your working style and, understanding your preferences. So it can be as short as 1 page, it can be a few pages long, but you can get super nitty-gritty with it, or you can be more high level. For example, "Oh, I prefer Slack over email," or when I communicate with you, it's like really helpful for me if you give an emoji response so I know that you saw something. So you can get like really granular with it, but holistically, it kind of gives someone a sense, okay, I've never worked with you before. Here's the manual, and now you'll learn a little bit more about me, and now we can kind of kick off things faster and get going and be more productive together.
Now it seems like that kind of just giving someone that manual would make an impression on me if I were receiving that and someone gave it to me. So it sounds like not only are you giving specific advice that's going to be useful for me as an employee, but this is going to start building a reputation for me the minute I
Mhm.
start handing this to people.
Yeah.
Any suggestions or thoughts about what aspects of my presence and reputation, since I'm starting the moment that I get there and hand someone this Bible, how should I do that, or what things should I keep in mind? Should I worry about fonts? Like I don't know. I don't know. What are the different elements of presence that are most important and that I want to pay the most attention to versus starting to, I mean, after I've known someone for 6 months, then it's about the details, or it's
Mhm.
about, the repetition of how I keep showing up. But they say first impressions matter. And there's a ton of
Uh-huh.
research on this, right? The first, 15 seconds or whatever is
Yeah, or shorter even, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I could tell you stories. Oh my God. Um, but that's for another day. Um, Uh, so I'm a new employee. What kinds of things should I be concentrating on? Like, what should I be setting as the backdrop of who I want people to see me as, that they're then going to start layering other impressions on?
Hmm. I think it's nice to have a personal mission statement or a way, like more of a general statement of how you operate. So, for example, in mine, instead of just getting right into the weeds right away, I stated that I was, I viewed myself as a servant leader, and this is sort of my methodology or how I view management. Like, I'm not someone who likes to micromanage. I prefer, trust, using Swift trust first to understand a teammate and to like let them run off on their own. And so, adding in, I think like your general approach to work and relationships can be a nice thing just for someone to again like feel more connected to you. I think I have a whole chapter on influence in the book. Influence is a big part of presence, and influence is going to be one of the best ways that things get done at work. So being able to build those relationships is key. And then I think you want to, at a minimum, include some key headers. So communication is always a foundation of business. So talking about your communication styles and preferences is going to be great. And then I included a section on giving and receiving feedback. I feel like that's a big part of presence and how others perceive you, that you are someone who's open to getting feedback, and also, you value the growth of your team members. And so I am also going to be someone who is not shy about giving feedback as well. So tapping into those key areas in terms of like interpersonal relationships, I think can be really helpful in establishing and building your presence.
Now you just said like here's what I'm about. I'm a servant leader, and I was thinking that's really let's so to some people that's a buzzword. I'm going to say let's actually look past the buzzwords.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
Essentially, part of what you would say if you introduced yourself and said that to me,
Mhm.
I would immediately be thinking almost like the Simon Sinek world, like you're starting with why. So
Mhm.
because I'm thinking someone doesn't define themselves as a servant leader unless they have a particular set of values. Otherwise, they're just going to come and go, "Oh, I'm a hard-hitting entrepreneurial
Yeah,
leader."
yeah,
I'm like, yeah, right, you and 80,000 other people.
yeah.
Um, but it sounds like there is a sense that's more almost around personal connection. You're not framing it as personal connection exactly, but if I read that, I'm going to think, oh, this is this person's why. Did you find that's what
Mhm.
happened with you? How did that play out? Was it vulnerable? Was it dangerous? Was it intrepid and brave? Was it ho hum?
Yeah, I don't think it was dangerous, but I think people appreciated it. And to your point, like later on in the read me, I went into more detail. Okay, what does that mean? Like, how do I actually manage? Okay, if you have a problem, like that's my problem, and I'm gonna make time, like any time that you need to chat with me, for example. I am going to send you articles and advocate for you to attend courses or whatever, to help you grow your career, because that's very important for me, that like I'm not just here to push the paperwork and to make sure things get done, but that you're actually growing and I'm here to support you. And I really feel like being a good manager is a people first role. First, some people like they're a manager to try to advance, but I think if you don't care about the people side of things, like you're not gonna do well as a manager. So um I don't, I didn't really ask how people viewed it, but I hope that it gave them confidence, especially for new folks working with me, that I was going to be someone who was going to support them and be transparent, right? Like I feel like the read me is me trying to say, hey, this is me, open to feedback, but trying to minimize the surprises and make sure that we are creating as best a working relationship as we can.
Sure. So, um, okay, so you talked a little bit then about the need to have a presence, the need to be showing up in the right places. And that when a lot of times when we think about presence, right, we think about like, oh, I am the CEO, whatever. Oh my God. Lorraine, don't go to business school. Did you go to business school? I don't remember.
I don't have
Okay.
plans now to go.
Oh, it broke me. It really did. I left business. I came in as a nerd. I was from high tech. Whatever. And I went to business school, and I spent the next 20 years thinking that I needed to wear a $1,000 suit and have a square
Mm,
jaw and gray hair and go, oh, I am Mr. Powerful. And as you can
sure.
tell, I don't think I could come across like that if my life depended on it,
Yeah,
whether
yeah,
or not I have the skills. It's like it's independent. So
yeah.
because we did talk about executive presence being more about the how people come across. Um, I am an introvert geek who was raised in a traveling new age polyamorous hippie commune. There are certain ways I'm not going to be capable of coming across. It's just not in my blood. I don't speak that language. So now that you've said that's how people usually think about it, and that's what you're not going to, what that's not what you're going to talk about, I'm going to actually say, yes, it is, because what I want is some tips for if I don't
Yeah,
have that traditional executive
yeah,
presence, what do I do? How do I have an unforgettable presence without
yeah.
being the without having a black turtleneck like Steve
Sure,
Jobs or
sure, sure,
you
yeah.
know
Yeah, it's a great call out. So I think the way you described executive presence, Steve, is how a lot of people think about it. However, good news for everyone. There was some really interesting data published in Harvard Business Review that showed the changing ways that we see executive presence. So it looked at the adjectives, from 2012 and how those changed in 2022 across gravitas, communication, and appearance. And there was a lot of changes for the better. So previously, for example, so actually across all three sections, you sort of saw people valuing similar things like you have to be able to be a good public speaker, you have to be able to own a room, all these things. But the adjectives, for example, like forcefulness, pushed off the list. Authenticity actually appeared on the list in 2022 across two of those adjectives. um, Use of body language also appeared, right? Not just owning the room, but owning the Zoom room. Physical attractiveness, that's a funny one, was pushed off the list.
it was
And
pushed off the
so,
list
yeah,
in
off
in
the
in,
list.
in the
So,
age of Instagram. That's very interesting to me.
yeah,
Okay.
I don't know, but I guess, people want, your more authentic self and not to fit a certain mold. But yeah, so a lot of these changes that I think are more suited for the introverts. I'm also an introvert, also suited for people who, yeah, just don't fit like that old school mold of what we view as an executive. And so hopefully that's good news for everyone. In the book, I talk about the three C's of modern day executive presence. So communication, career, brand, and credibility. So obviously, gravitas, et cetera, like those are all going to be important things. But I wanted to reframe it into these three C's because I do feel like a lot has changed and people are looking for different qualities and traits in a leader now. And I really hope people are excited about this because I think it's more inclusive now, and people want to see more of that authentic person, that authentic leader, and we're not looking for that specific mold as much anymore.
I believe me. I mean, to me, I'm just sitting here thinking, what incredible progress. Um, One of the things that I did this initially by accident, is my virtual backgrounds are created by AI. I confess. I also confess being a big supporter of photographers and graphic design people that for every AI creation I use, I actually go and purchase something from an actual creator, even if I don't use it.
Oh, very cool.
So
Yeah.
I'm trying to at least keep the money flowing to the creators, even if I don't use their
Okay.
specific
Yeah.
product. But this was one of the early backgrounds that I had
Okay.
created. And I just created this because I personally like bright colors. Well, it turns out I was in a Zoom meeting with 16 other people, and everyone else had a beige background. So, and I had this. Every time I raised my hand, every single time, I would get picked on, or I would get called. I got called and mentioned three times as much as anyone else in that. Now, I'm sure it's because I am stunningly handsome and brilliant and have tremendous insights. However, I'm also pretty sure that it's because I had a background that actually made me
Yeah.
stand out. And I don't think
Yeah.
anyone realized that's what was doing it. I think that they were, I was just like, oh, look, I noticed that Stever, he's raising his hand. Yeah, well, the reason you notice
Yeah.
it is because I'm surrounded by bright colors. Um, anyway,
Conscious.
that's
That's very cool. Yeah, I like that story.
so that's my, to the extent that I have tremendous Zoom tricks, that's the biggie. Um, cool. I
Great.
just noticed we've been going for quite a while. We probably should wrap up because I try to limit these to 25 minutes or so. So tell me if so two things. One is, if people remember nothing else, what like top one, two, or three tips should they walk away with when they're thinking
Mm,
about presence and becoming unforgettable?
My one takeaway I want everyone to have is that presence is something that we all can have, that we can build, that we can strengthen. It is something that is should be worked on at all points during our careers, not just when we become, that senior leadership level. And so my hope is that people feel confident and empowered to know that presence exists in many different spaces in our day to days, and that we can all get better at it.
Cool. And what book would you recommend that they read on it? Hint, hint.
Mm. There's a new book out called Unforgettable Presence: Get Seen, Gain Influence, and Catapult Your Career. And so you can buy it wherever books are sold.
Awesome. And how can people reach you?
LinkedIn, of course, you can find me there. And then I have a weekly free newsletter, Career Bites, bite-sized tips to supercharge your career in 3 minutes or less. So you can find that at lorraineklee.com/subscribe. And then I have many, many LinkedIn learning courses out, most of which are free and under 10 minutes. So I encourage you to check those out.
Ooh, how can I find those?
You can go to LinkedIn Learning and just search my name, or lorraineklee.com/LinkedIn Learning will also take you there. So 19 courses out. There's something for everyone.
Wow. All right. That is totally awesome. Thank you very much for joining me, Lorraine. And I hope that I wish you all the success, and I hope that you have
Thank
presence
you.
in all of the places that are important to you.
Thank
And
you, Steve. I appreciate it.
uh, and thanks again.